Why do some people stay stuck in adolescence, never truly stepping into adulthood? Why does settling down feel like giving something up, even when there's nothing solid to hold on to? And why is it easier for them to live in the dream of who they could be than to risk becoming someone real? In today's episode, I'm exploring the Puer Aeternus through the lens of astrology. In mythology, the Puer Aeternus is a child god that stays eternally youthful. And in Jungian psychology, it's known as a psychological pattern and an archetypal blueprint for someone who deeply struggles with maturing into adulthood. I'm exploring the symbolic and archetypal nature of the eternal child as a core human experience, and one that more and more of us can relate to in today's modern society. So if you've ever wondered about the astrology of the Puer Aeternus, then stick around, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Hi, I'm Sophie, and this is a space for curious minds, meaning seekers, and anyone drawn to the deeper layers of astrology and the human experience. So in today's episode, I'll start with looking at where the Puer Aeternus archetype comes from and the patterns that shape it. Then I'll bring in some astrological and tarot symbolism to unpack different ways that the eternal child can show up. And as always, I'll reflect on some of the shadow elements that's keeping us stuck so that we can better understand what's going on beneath the surface. So before I dive into this symbolism, let's explore the core traits of the Puer Aeternus. Firstly, they struggle with the transition from adolescence into adulthood. They're gifted, charming, creative, and often very socially adept, but this can mask a deeper fragility and avoidance of responsibility. They resist commitment and responsibility like the plague. They live more in their fantasies and perceive the real world as dull and boring. The actual input required to achieve their goals becomes an obstacle that they can't overcome, which leads to unfinished projects and unrealized potential. So they tend to have high expectations for themselves and their lives, and they deem ordinary things to be beneath them because they perceive themselves as capable of greatness. But they rarely achieve that greatness because they lack the ability to deal with the inevitable frictions of real life. They seek joy and freedom and loathe anything that involves discipline, foresight, or structure. They often chase new ideas with novelty and passion, but without considering the long-term plan, financial limits, and the day-to-day maintenance. In pop psychology, this pattern is often referred to as Peter Pan syndrome. It describes the boy who never grows up, who lives out the heroic fantasy of his life, but never truly seeing the value in engaging with reality. It's worth noting that this archetype is often portrayed as male, but it's not limited to men. It reflects patterns that can exist in anyone. That being said, the reason that we tend to associate the Puer Aeternus with men is because it expresses qualities that tend to be more associated with the masculine psyche. Things like autonomy, idealism, fear of entrapment, and heroic aspirations. But those same themes can show up in women too, so I might refer to the Puer Aeternus as he, but what we're really looking at is a psychological orientation rather than a specific gender. So how does somebody become a Puer Aeternus? There are a few contributing factors. The first one is parenting. Often the Puer Aeternus has overprotective parents who excessively coddle them and do everything for them, lacking the necessary boundaries to help their child develop into a resilient person in their adulthood. If a child isn't given the right tools to deal with challenge and discomfort, they don't develop those muscles as they grow up. But parenting is only one piece. Modern society also plays a really big role. Things like economic instability, rapid social change, and increasing technological stimulation all shape how people grow up and what they expect from life. As we become more comfortable in our modern world, and when life feels unstable or chaotic, more of us find it easier to retreat back into safety and avoid daunting tasks of adulthood altogether. And the resistance to adulthood is becoming easier now that we have more simulated experiences. Through video games, virtual realities, social media, and even AI-enhanced storytelling, the Puer Aeternus now has more tools tools than ever to simulate their fantasy without ever having to deal with the messiness of real life. You can simulate achievement, intimacy, and even heroism without ever leaving your room. And while these technologies aren't inherently bad, they can easily become a playground for avoidance. Instead of committing to real-world growth, the Puer Aeternus can stay suspended in infinite possibilities, where nothing has to be finished, nothing has to be sacrificed, and failure doesn't really exist. Another key part of this pattern is the absence of meaningful rites of passage. In many traditional cultures, adulthood was marked by clear events, usually things like rituals, ceremonies, or trials, designed to create a transition between a child and adult that's both psychological and social. But in modern Western societies, most of those traditions have disappeared. Instead, we've replaced them with milestones like graduating from university or buying your first home, markers that are increasingly out of reach in today's economic climate. So without these experiences, many people drift from childhood into adulthood without ever feeling that sense of initiation into life. There's no moment where they consciously or symbolically leave their childhood self behind and enter into the next phase. If you're interested in this topic and want to go a bit deeper, I highly recommend watching Dr. K's talk on the psychology of the modern Puer Aeternus. I'll leave the link below. So while no single planet or sign can encompass the Puer Aeternus in its entirety, we can piece together patterns by looking at several archetypal energies, because when they're blended or overemphasized, they form a kind of symbolic cocktail that closely align with the Puer Aeternus's behaviors and mindset. So let's start with Neptune. Neptune is the planet of fantasy, divine longing, artistic vision, and the disillusion of boundaries. At its best, it brings transcendence, imagination, and compassion. But at its worst, Neptune can fall into illusion, denial, and escapism. This Neptunian dreamlike quality mirrors the Puer Aeternus's rejection of reality in favor of an idealized inner world. Then we have Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism, and belief. It governs our sense of possibility, moral purpose, and higher understanding. But when Jupiter is overinflated, it becomes more entitled, grandiose, and allergic to obstacles. It promises big things, but it lacks the follow-through to achieve them. Jupiter rules Pisces and Sagittarius, two signs that both seek freedom, transcendence, and a kind of mythic significance to life. Pisces wants to dissolve into a blissful oneness, and Sagittarius wants to go on an epic quest for truth. But when they're unbalanced, both signs can struggle with containment. They don't want to be held back by rules, routines, or responsibilities. Sagittarius is especially relevant to the Puer Aeternus archetype. Its symbol, the centaur, which is half man and half horse, represents the split between primal instinct and higher wisdom. But in its shadow, it can become the archetype of heroic inflation and dogmatic beliefs, forever chasing truth, meaning, and adventure, but never staying grounded long enough to build anything real. To understand the deeper dynamics of the Puer Aeternus, we also need to look at the sun and the moon. So the sun represents ego, purpose, identity, and self-expression. But when it's influenced by energies like Neptune and Jupiter, it can become inflated or idealized. The person may dream of becoming extraordinary or having a special destiny, but without the right grounding or structure, the dream will only remain a fantasy. The moon, on the other hand, represents our emotional world, our inner child, and what makes us feel safe. And when influenced by Neptune or Jupiter, the moon can become tied to longing for the perfect childhood, freedom from discomfort, disappointment, and responsibility. So this person might carry a subconscious resistance to growing up, especially if they associate adulthood with abandonment, pain, or limitations. The Puer Aeternus wants to shine without discipline and be nurtured without restrictions. It craves both adventure and protection, but these two desires are often at odds. Their refusal to let go of emotional safety just keeps them from risking real responsibility, and their desire to be exceptional can prevent them from facing the mundane tasks that build maturity. Venus and Mercury are also planets that share traits that align with the Puer Aeternus archetype. Venus symbolizes beauty, harmony, and attraction, so it seeks to enjoy life through the senses and to experience connection, comfort, and ease. Mercury, on the other hand, rules over thought, communication, wit, and curiosity. It governs the way that we learn, speak, and mentally navigate the world. So together, these two planets describe a lightness of being, a charm, social fluency, and playfulness that can be incredibly magnetic. In the Puer Aeternus, these qualities often show up as creativity, humor, and the love of enjoyment for its own sake. But in its shadow expression, Venus can become self-indulgent, while Mercury can become arrogant or slippery. The two signs ruled by Venus and Mercury that best reflect the qualities of the Puer Aeternus are Libra and Gemini. Both are air signs, both are inherently youthful and socially aware. Libra, which is ruled by Venus, is diplomatic, romantic, and idealistic. Its natural inclination is to seek harmony and connection, but it can fall into indecision and constantly seeking out ease. Its desire for beauty and peace can reveal an unwillingness to deal with life's inevitable discomforts. Then we have Gemini, ruled by Mercury. It's agile, curious, playful, and easily distracted. It's mutable air, so it's quick, changeable, and intellectually driven. Gemini's restlessness, love of novelty, and resistance to routine can make it brilliant but erratic. It reflects the Puer Aeternus's avoidance of finality and its reluctance to grow roots. The Puer Aeternus wants to keep all doors open, to flirt with every possibility without committing to any one path. So the same theme runs through all of this, which is a refusal to commit, a refusal to deal with the friction of life where things are messy, difficult, and finite. And that brings us to our final piece, the Puer Aeternus's mythic opposite. No exploration of the Puer Aeternus would be complete without naming its counterpart, the Senex. The Senex is Latin for old man, and in Jungian terms, the archetype represents structure, order, wisdom, and time. It's everything that the Puer Aeternus resists. And in astrology, the Senex is, of course, Saturn. Saturn is the ruler of time, and it governs boundaries, discipline, and delayed gratification. While the Puer Aeternus wants to play in the world of dreams, Saturn wants to pull us back to Earth. So the Senex archetype is there to force us to face limitations, which is precisely what the eternal child wants to avoid. To the Puer Aeternus, limitations feel like death, the death of potential, the death of fantasy, and the death of freedom. But from the Senex perspective, limits aren't a punishment. They're the very thing that gives shape to life, and without them, nothing becomes real. So the Puer Aeternus wants reward without the cost, and the Senex says that the cost is what makes the reward more meaningful. So to evolve, the Puer Aeternus would need to integrate their inner Senex instead of rejecting it. In the tarot, the page cards offer a really vivid symbolic lens for understanding the Puer Aeternus. Pages represent youth, potential, and new beginnings. They symbolize a developmental stage where identity, skills, and direction are still being formed. So each page reflects a different area of growth. The Page of Cups represents emotion, relationships, and imagination, and is the element of water. The Page of Pentacles represents practicality, growth, and long-term effort, and is the element of earth. The Page of Swords represents curiosity, communication, and intelligence, and is the element of air. And the Page of Wands represents action, creativity, and energy, and is the element of fire. So when integrated, these cards represent a person learning how to grow into a functional adult. But in their shadow, they each reflect the potential for arrested development, those core behaviors of adolescence essence that remains stagnant or unevolved. For the Page of Cups, its shadow trait will be escapism, emotional immaturity, and idealized fantasies of love and connection. For the Page of Swords, the shadow trait would be arrogance, scattered focus, and overstimulation. For the Page of Wands, the shadow trait would be impulsivity, restlessness, and a lack of follow through. And the Page of Pentacles, the shadow trait would be laziness, procrastination, and a disconnection from material effort. Together, the 4 pages represent the fragmented psyche of the eternal child, where aspects of the whole self remain undeveloped. The Puer Aeternus archetype emerges when these inner fragments become frozen. So how do we grow beyond this and begin to heal our inner eternal child? The first step is to connect with your inner Senex or Saturn. Working with your Saturn placement can reveal where life's asking you to develop resilience, responsibility, and long-term commitment. It's usually the area of life that doesn't come easily to you, but also where the most meaningful growth is possible. It's the part of your birth chart that requires sustained effort, but can bring real-world mastery over time. The Puer Aeternus avoids Saturn because Saturn forces us to face our limitations. So this is the deeper invitation of Saturn, to shape our potential into form, to take the vast imaginative world of the Puer Aeternus and root it into something real. Because if you never commit, then the dream stays exactly that, just a fantasy. Let me know in the comments which part of the Puer Aeternus you resonate with the most. If you enjoyed this video, then you can check out my other videos of this series, the astrology of hyper-independence and the astrology of people-pleasing. And make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode of this series. I also offer private readings, so if you want to explore these patterns in your own chart, you can book a session from the link below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.